Hello everyone, myself Priyanka, and today we are again back with our next lecture. So in today's lecture we will be discussing about the approaches to the study of Indian politics further. Okay, in the last lecture we discussed about what is the actual meaning of approach. I hope that was clear to you all. The meaning of approach, in short, I'll tell you, is the point of view of any political scientist to study any topics related to the politics, right? So in this lecture we will be covering further, that is, what are the different kinds of approaches that is used in Indian political studies, right? And what are further subtypes of those approaches. So in the last lecture only we discussed that there are two different divergent types of approaches that is used to study the Indian politics. Okay. So what are those two approaches? First is the normative approach, or we say that traditional approach. Okay. That includes ethics and values in their study. And next type of approach that we dealt with was the experimental approach or scientific approach, that is also known as the modern approach, right? In that we do not very much believe in values, we do not very much rely on ethics. What we rely on is analytical scientific experiments, right? So we rely on the scientific data, scientific experiments, and then we study or research any kind of topic. Okay. So today in this lecture we will be covering about the 5 subtypes of normative approaches. Okay, what are the 5 subtypes of normative approaches? We already read, right? If you all remember, we read about the philosophical approach, historical approach, institutional approach, comparative approach, and legal approach. These are the 5 subtypes of normative or traditional approaches that we only mentioned in our last lecture. In this lecture, one by one we will be discussing about each and every subtype of normative approaches to Indian political study. Okay, so these are the divergent approaches of Indian political study. We already discussed, right? Philosophical, historical, institutional, comparative, and legal. These are the normative, that is the traditional approaches. Okay, that was used before. Okay, these are the traditional approaches to the study of Indian politics, which includes values in their study, right? We consider the ethics of our society very much in these types of researches or in these types of study. Next we have scientific or empirical, that we will not discuss today. We will cover this in another lecture. Okay, what are those types of approaches? That is sociological, systems, behavioral, and developmental approaches. We will be covering these topics one by one in the next lecture. In today's lecture we will be discussing about philosophical, historical approaches to the study of Indian politics. So our first approach is philosophical approach. What do we understand by philosophical approach or philosophical point of view of studying any topic? So this philosophical approach basically covers the entire human development or includes the entire human development in their research of study or in their field of study. Whenever we study any topic of our society, may that be we might be studying a voting behavior of any place, right, or any region basically, or we might be studying about the administrative structure of any place. Whenever we will study these topics from philosophical approach, from philosophical point of view, we will basically be covering entire human development in our point of study, in our field of study. Okay, what do we understand by considering or including the entire human development? When we say we consider the entire human development, we are not only talking of any specific institution, that is, we are not only talking of formal institutions, We are also talking of the informal institutions. We are also talking of the people who are not involved in any institution. That is, who have these side roles, right? And who are being affected by these kinds of institutions. So whenever we study any topic, may that be we might be studying about the voting behavior of any particular field, any particular region. For example, let's consider we are studying the voting behavior of Jharkhand. Okay. So when we are studying the voting behavior of Jharkhand, we will not only include in our study the data of the functioning of State Election Commission of Jharkhand. Okay, neither we will only include the Central Election Commission. Okay, we will be including the entire voters. We will be including the entire informal organizations who are involved either in campaigning or in executing the process of voting itself, right? The entire voting system. We will not leave anything, or neither we will leave the sentiments of the people. We will also include the sentiments, emotions, inclination of people, everything we will include in our study for the voting behavior. Like, we will not be dealing with only one kind of population or one section of the population. Okay, we will include the entire population of that particular society that we are actually dealing with. Cool. So that is known as the philosophical approach. Now what we need to know more about the philosophical approach from Indian perspective is the there was a Renaissance movement or a Renaissance period in India also. Do we understand the meaning of Renaissance? The word Renaissance means the rebirth. Okay, the literal meaning of the word Renaissance is rebirth or reformation of something. Okay, so in our Indian movement, after independence or during the independence, we had a set of leaders, we had a set of people who were involved in the rebirth of India, who were actually involved in the modernization of India, development of India from the modern view or from the modernization view. Okay. So we will understand that there were certain set of people in the Renaissance movement who were actually supporting this philosophical approach, right? They were supporting that if we study our entire society of Indian politics from philosophical approach, then we will be able to understand our society better, and the reform in our society could be very widened or could be very well executed. Now who were those leaders? We need to know. So I will write the names of few leaders who were involved in the Indian Renaissance movement. Okay. These are few individuals who were actually involved in the Indian Renaissance movement. What do we mean by the Indian Renaissance movement? That means they were wanting a change in our society. What change in our society they were wanting? Let's take some example. For example, we had a number of evils in our society during the British period, that is in the pre-independence period. We had it and we still have it in post-independence period also, but constitutionally it is numb, right? We have somehow corrected these evils constitutionally, but we are yet to correct it in our social aspect. In the social field we still practice it, right? But if we talk constitutionally, then constitutionally we have banned these evil practices, right? But some people still practice it and they are not being punished. So we cannot say that those evils are completely eradicated, right? But constitutionally we have eradicated. Now what were those evils? Those evils could be laid down as sati pratha, those evil could be laid down as female infanticide or foeticide, right? What else? Child marriage, okay. Now what else? Casteism, that is untouchability. We say that untouchability we have somehow recovered, or we have reformed it, the untouchability, we have banned it through constitution. But I don't think we have completely eradicated untouchability from our society. We are still practicing it, either in a very small aspect or in a larger aspect. We are ignoring it, but we are practicing it, okay. And if we think that we have overcome the casteism from our society, we have eradicated the casteism from our society by giving reservations, or by providing a number of helps and platforms to raise the people who were oppressed during the period of casteism, where we say casteism was very much practiced, then we must know one important thing, that still today inter-caste marriage is considered as a crime, right? And in a society where an inter-caste marriage is considered as a crime, we cannot say that we are not practicing casteism, because if casteism, what do we mean by casteism? One caste is considered inferior and one caste is considered superior, right? So if inferiority and superiority, this concept would have been blended, then this inter-caste marriage would not have been a crime, right? This could have, why am I saying it crime? Because still there are a number of people, there are a number of family who kill their children in the name of inter-caste marriage. And we have a number of examples, okay, list of examples of it. We cannot deny this truth. So these were some of the evils that these individuals wanted to reform in our society, okay. And apart from that also, there were a number of political and economical deficits that they wanted to reform. Now when they wanted to reform, what was their approach of philosophy? We will be discussing about that, and that is very important. So according to their philosophical approach, they meant that they wanted modernization in India, okay. They wanted modernization in India, and that could be possible through scientific approach. They were including scientific approach, okay. They wanted scientific development in our society, but they did not want to copy or imitate the West in this approach. What do we mean by they do not wanted to imitate West? Because in West, whenever scientific approach is involved, they keep the value aside from scientific development. But these all, each one of them believed that if scientific approach or as scientific developments comes to our society, we will welcome it wholeheartedly, but we will not keep spiritual development aside. We will never keep spiritual development, internal growth apart from scientific development. Their words were like, if at all scientific development arrives in our society and the spiritual development leaves our society, then it is nothing more than binding a soul of any individual. That means if we are only proceeding with scientific developments and we are not at all keeping or considering the ethics and values, not including the ethics and values in the scientific development, in the modernization, then we are only binding these souls, right? We are burdening these souls. We are doing nothing more. This is not modernization. Modernization should come along with ethical development from spiritual growth, okay. So approaches to their modernization was scientific development combined with ethical development. And also in these in their approaches, we need to remember two very important approaches. One is Gandhian philosophy, and another is Vivekananda's religious nationalism. Okay, we need to consider these two philosophies in our philosophical approach. They too were the members of Indian Renaissance movement, right? Excuse me. And they believed, from Gandhian philosophy we understand that Mr. Gandhi believed that if we need to reach to any end, that means if we want to achieve something, what is end? What is end of something? That is output, right? If we want any kind of output, the input should be equally pious, that means pure. If we want any kind of purity in our output, it should be achieved through a pure input. Okay, so Gandhian philosophy said that means and ends are interchangeable. That means, I'll just give you an example. He said that if you want stability in your society, if you want non-violence in your society, then you must achieve that non-violence through silent protest, through non-violent protest. If you want to achieve non-violence, if you want to achieve freedom, then achieve it through non-violence. So Gandhian philosophy said that means and ends are interchangeable, right? If you want any kind of pure end, you need to put the input also a very pure one. Okay. This is what the Gandhian philosophy meant and discussed in the philosophical approach. Then we come again with Sir Vivekananda's religious nationalism. Through this view and approach, he meant that religion can never be put aside. Okay, while developing the national unity, it is not that we can keep religion aside. Religious development is the backbone of our national development. He said that religious development is the backbone of our national development. That means, we discussed, right? We discussed previously also, whenever we are in the philosophical approach of any kind of study, we include the development of all humankind, right? We are not even leaving one bit of section in our study, in a focus of study. So Sir Vivekananda said that whenever we want to achieve any kind of national unity, it should be backed by religious unity. That means it is not something that you are destroying the religious values, you are destroying the religious sentiments of some people, and then you are achieving a national unity. That is no unity. Because if that kind of unity is achieved somehow, that will break one day, right? Because people who are leaving their religious values and ethics because of some kind of unity that they want to achieve for temporary period of time, they will again get back to their religious spirituality, and that time the national unity will be broken. So Sir Vivekananda advocated that if we want any kind of unity in our society, may that be national unity, may that be regional, only of any particular places unity we want, only of one particular state's unity we want. We cannot ignore the religious sentiments, we cannot ignore the religious values of any people, right? And now that we are done with Gandhian philosophy and Vivekananda's religious nationalism, we come to two other individuals that we talked about in Indian Renaissance movement, that is Sir Aurobindo Ghosh and Sir Gokhale. They both believe that India has a spiritual mission. That means the politics or society or economy, everything should be spiritualized. What do we understand by spiritualized? That means inner purity, soul's purity, conscience, right? Awakening of conscience. That means everything we do is rational. What is the meaning of rational? Rational means having a conscience of what is right and what is wrong. Okay. So, Sir Aurobindo Ghosh, Sir both believed in spiritual mission of India. They both believed that whatever institution we have in our society, may that be a social institution, may that be an economic institution, or may that be a political institution, everything should be spiritualized. That means it should be pure from their inner side, pure from their conscience. Okay, this is all about the philosophical approach. Now we come to the critiques of philosophical approach. Okay, this approach was used traditionally, but that doesn't mean that it did not have any kind of critique. It has its own critiques. So what are the critiques or demerits of this philosophical approach? Political scientists said that this philosophical approach is very abstract, incomplete and imaginary. That is something that is not real, right? We cannot consider each and every section of our society, we cannot study each and every section of our society and then come to any kind of conclusion. That is nearly impossible. Okay, so first critique of the philosophical approach is it is considered abstract and speculative. Abstract and speculative. What is the meaning of speculative? That is based on speculation, andaza, है ना, अंदाजे पे based. Everything is based on speculation, right? So philosophical approach was considered abstract and speculative. The second most important critique of this philosophical approach is it is based on ethics, and ethics is variable for everyone. That means what is moral for me, morally correct for me, might not be morally correct for you. Okay, might not be very morally correct for you. So this morals vary from each individual to each individual. So this is somehow very complicated study. Okay, and whenever we study anything from philosophical approach, we need to consider every kind of moral, and that is very time taking and very complex. How at all we will be able to reach to any kind of conclusion, right? So this philosophical approach with another kind of approach, if it is combined, it could be very effective, right? But if we study any kind of topic only from philosophical approach, it will be a bit difficult, and somehow we will never be able to reach to any kind of conclusion. And if at all we come to a conclusion, then every political scientist will have their own conclusion, because for each political scientist, their own ethics will vary, right? So second most important critique of this philosophical approach is ethics are variable. It's not constant, right? Now this is all about the philosophical approach. Now we will switch to another kind of approach, and that is the historical approach, right? Before that, something important. There are some important writings, important books and essays of philosophical approach that we should not miss. Okay. So, for example, the very first is Ram Manohar Lohia's Sorry. These are some important writings that we cannot miss from philosophical approach. Okay. Now we switch to another approach, and that is the historical approach to the study of Indian politics. Okay. Now what do we understand by historical approach? By historical approach we mean that whatever has happened in history, okay, whenever we are studying any kind of topic in our society, we go back to history, we recall the history, we collect the data from the events of history, and then we compare that data from today's scenario. We compare different events of history, okay, from today's scenario, and then we try to relate whether that time whatever happened, okay, was similar to what is happening right now, and if at all it is similar, what kind of decision was taken in the history, and if we could take the same decision in today's society also for that particular problem, for that particular issue, or to make a development in that particular field. So what is the historical approach to the study of Indian politics? That means whatever is stored in our history as a knowledge, as an information, whatever data we have, whatever kinds of events we study, we actually try to relate them to today's modern society and modern problem and modern events, okay. And when we compare these, then we take similar kind of decision what was taken in history in today's society. That is known as the historical approach to the study of Indian politics, okay. So we also have critique to this kind of approach. So what is the critique to the historical approach? The critique to the historical approach is that the problems that existed in the past might seem to be similar to today's problem, but that could be misleading, right? What we are studying right now, okay, that happened in history, and what is happening in today's society might seem to be similar, okay, but the knowledge that exists today, the behavioral pattern that exists today in individuals might not be existing at that point of time. So this history could be misleading, okay. So very first critique of historical approaches, it is misleading, okay. If we take a similar kind of decision that was taken in history, that might prove to be a wrong experiment, okay, that might be proved to be a wrong experiment, and hence historical approach is a bit dangerous kind of approach. And also whatever kind of decision that was taken in history and we have a record of it right now, that doesn't mean it was a very good decision or it is the best kind of decision. So whenever we rely only on historical approach, then we might be able to, or we might fail to, cater help to our society, cater help to our academic study of any kind of politics, right? So for example, today we see that number of educated people in our country has increased as we had during the pre-independence time, okay. So if at all we have a conflict between two religions today in our society, and also we had the conflict between two religions during the pre-independence era, these origin of these conflicts might differ, okay. The origin of these conflicts might differ. Today who are conflicting are the educated people, quite a possibility, not the exact reality, quite a possibility. And that time who were actually fighting amongst each other were surely the uneducated people, who were pelting stones at each other were surely the uneducated people, right. So now if we take the similar kind of decision that was taken in the pre-independence era for the conflicts to be resolved that were taken at that time, in today's scenario also, we will not be able to resolve the conflict, right. So this is the main critique of the historical approach that we see, and yeah, Now we will be reading about some of the writings of the historical approach that we cannot miss. These are the notes of whatever we read right now. Please capture. Okay. And then we'll proceed further towards the writings of the historical approach. Okay. That can be very useful in the study of these kinds of approaches. These are some of the important writings of historical approach to the Indian politics. Okay, that could be very helpful in studying that kind of approach.